Connecticut East This Week is supported by...
Don't let harmful mold damage your property and cause health concerns. Call the experts at Service Master by Mason to eliminate harmful mold and mildew from your home or business. Call today, 860-455-1249 or servicemasterbymason.com.
She's been named Connecticut's Outstanding Young Farmer of 2025. We talk with Allyson Angelini and visit her to see what she's doing down at Full Heart Farm in Ledyard. Plus, we take a look at other stories making the headlines from around the region. This is Connecticut East This Week. Hello, I'm Brian Scott Smith. Farming in Connecticut is a big deal, and in case you didn't know, the state has over 5,000 farms that employ around 22,000 people, and the industry contributes approximately $4 billion to the state's economy each year. Farming is a tough business with unsociable working hours, the risk of floods washing away fields, and then there's the bugs and insects that also have to be contended with, attacking vegetables and other crops. Despite all of that, our farmers are hard-working every day to bring us in Connecticut products that are grown here and make sure the food supply chain keeps moving. But farming is facing a bit of a crisis in the state, with many of our farmers aging out and not as many people wanting to become farmers. That said, there are always exceptions to the rule, and farmer Allyson Angelini of Full Heart Farm, based in Ledyard, is one of them. Recently named Connecticut's Outstanding Young Farmer of 2025, we went to visit her down on the farm for a chat. We're talking to Allyson Angelini of Full Heart Farm. We are sat in the very cool, and when I say cool, it's coolly decorated, but it's also cool in temperature as well, farmhouse on the property. Thanks for inviting us. One, have a discussion with you, and also to see what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming out.
We should, of course, start off by congratulating you, because you were named the Outstanding Young Farmer for 2025 here in the state of Connecticut. That must have meant a lot to you.
It did. It came at a stressful time in the farm. And so it was one of those situations where, like, the disparity between my excitement about an award that I didn't quite feel like perhaps I had earned, because I had been experienced a lot of struggle on the farm at the time, which is just how farming goes, right? It's seasonal in every attribute. And one of them is that there are really high highs, like you get a beautiful crop of something's really delicious. And then there's really low lows when we're dealing with the pests and the weather and other unexpected things. And yeah, sometimes it's difficult for me to it was hard for me to just feel super excited about it, because we had so many other things going on at the farm amidst a big barn renovation.
I get it. That's absolutely understandable. Let's talk about how it all started, because I know it's not polite to ask people's ages, but you're only 37, I believe, aren't you?
I think so.
Okay.
That's not a number that I have to recall very often, but we'll go with it.
The reason I mention it, I think you've been farming for about 13 years, and you started when you were about 24. That's when you got the property, wasn't it?
Yeah, so this is our 14th growing season at Full Heart Farm. So we've been here for just over 13 years. This actually is my 20th year farming.
Oh, 20th, yeah. Okay.
Not here, but
overall.
In total.
So talk to us about how this started, though, because you, as I understand it, you were 24, you were single, you had originally decided back in college, university, you wanted to do journalism, and then decided, hey, no, actually, I like this instead. So you set on a completely different major, have achieved great things. Why did you decide farming, though?
Originally, when I was in high school, I found my place working at the school magazine. And as the layout editor, I just really loved that aspect of it. I've always loved magazines. My mom has 6 sisters, and they all subscribe to different magazines, and they exchange them, and it's once a month when they gather for tea. So it's always something that I look forward to, is getting the hand-me-down magazines. And so I went to school originally to study magazine journalism because I wanted to be the layout editor of a food magazine like Bon Appetit. But I realized as I was taking the journalism classes and the food studies prerequisites that I actually had zero interest in journalism. And there's no step to becoming a layout editor, really. There wasn't at the time. It was the early 2000s when journalism was going through a transition in terms of print media. Probably wasn't like a great field to be entering to begin with. And so I was taking a lot of food and cultural studies classes. I went to UMass Amherst, maintained a really incredible local food economy. There's so many great relationships between local chefs and local farms and great farmers markets for people to be able to support local. And I just thought, this is so incredible, like that this community is sustained in this way. It was also at a time when a lot of popular media was coming out exposing ickiness in commercial farming operations. That was when like Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma was written and Barbara Kingsolver's Animal Vegetable Miracle, right? There were a lot of books coming out about how local food or even just real food-based diets could be a solution to so many of our country's health and economic problems. And I fell in love with the tangible work of that. And I felt that was a solution that I could contribute to, right? I'd do meaningful work, create an impact, and eat really well. So I went to Italy to study abroad, and I worked on a 1,500-acre organic farm. And that was the first time that I like lived and worked on a farm, and I loved the lifestyle. So when I came back, I set myself on the path towards farm ownership, and
here you are.
Here I am.
I understand you got a grant to purchase some land. I'm guessing it's the land that we're sat on today, is it?
It wasn't really a grant, but the government had a program for beginning farmers and ranchers. And so essentially, like, the federal government holds my mortgage, but it works in favor of farmers for a couple of important reasons.
Where did you go from there once you got it? This farm is vegetables and flowers. That's clearly what you had in mind, I'm guessing, was it?
No, initially. So when I lived in Italy, I fell in love with raising pigs and curing meat. And initially that was a large part of my plan. So I actually arrived at the closing for the property with my Volvo station wagon full of piglets and a box of chicks. And for many years, we offered a meal-based CSA. So people would come and through the community supported agriculture program, essentially pick up all the ingredients that they needed to make a meal or two. So they received eggs, pork, chicken, rotating through, and vegetables. We had some berries. They got herbs, and we did a lot of recipe sharing and that sort of thing. We used the animals to clear the land. It wasn't an active farm. And so they cleared the land and they built fertility. And then I got married. I had 4 kids. I became weary of everyone being hungry at the same time. And so I no longer felt excited to start and end my day doing chores to feed and care for the animals.
I was going to say, because what sort of time you must have been getting up really early and sort of going to bed quite late, because that's a lot of work.
Yeah, my husband works full-time off farm, and we have 4 kids, which makes childcare pretty unaffordable. So the way that we've navigated that is that I generally work from 3:30 or 4 in the morning until noon, and then he works from either 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, and that way there's only a couple hours of the day where our work day overlaps, that I have the kids with me on the farm.
How exciting is it for you as a woman in agriculture in the farming industry? Because you're still like in the minority, aren't you?
I think...
But it is changing.
I think women have always played a crucial role in agriculture that they've never been recognized for. Like, the image of a farmer has always been male, like white male over 60, essentially. But that was only made possible by so many women behind the scenes that were, even if they weren't out in the fields all the time, they were managing the books and doing the marketing and doing all of that. And I think, yes, now as farming became sexy for a little while, There was a lot of romanticizing of what a career in agriculture looks like. More people from a wider diversity of backgrounds came in and developed efficient ways to grow food on a smaller scale, right? That's the only way that first generation farmers have land access. Really, there's very few people out of college who can just buy 100 acres and equipment and put in infrastructure needed to grow food and hit the ground running. And it's been a lot of things all at the same time, but that have allowed women to be more recognized for their work in farming.
Where did the name come from? Because it's called Full Heart Farm.
Oh, so I'm the sort of person who loves to just like deliberate endlessly over every decision. And I end up inevitably like lying on the floor, complaining to my husband that I'm suffering from decision fatigue. At the time that I was like, I'm sure languishing on the kitchen floor while we were still dating. We were watching the show Friday Night Lights. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It's about Texas football, which I just in general don't like sports at all. But it was like a popular show in the early 2000s because there was more than just watching football. But the high school team's motto was clear eyes, full heart, can't lose. And Keith, my husband, was like, how about Full Heart Farm? And I didn't actually love it 100%, but it was a really good option. And we just went with it, and it stuck.
And then when did you make that decision to move away? Because you don't have animals on the farm anymore, do you? It's just like flowers and vegetables, isn't it?
Yeah, so we phased them out every time I had a kid. So when Henry was born, the pigs got out and went swimming in the neighbor's pool. And then shortly after that, they escaped to the neighboring town. And it turns out it costs a lot of money to bail a pig out of animal control. And so I was like, I can't do it anymore. There were other things happening too. Access to slaughterhouses was really difficult, and transportation and that sort of thing. And then my daughter Cora arrived. She was a very difficult baby, and I just couldn't make the meat chickens work with that schedule. And then once Sadie was born, our laying hens started to drive me crazy. My patience for the livestock just started to dwindle in general, but they kept getting out and like eating our vegetable crops and not paying rent, which is laying enough eggs to balance out the predation and everything else. So we like slowly phased those back as well. And we didn't get rid of all of our animals until Lila was born.
So talk to us about what it is that you do now. Like we said, it's vegetables and flowers. It's still a huge amount of different things that you do. Talk us through about some of the stuff that you do, because it's quite a wide variety.
Yeah, so we raise over 300 different varieties of specialty vegetables, cut flowers, and herbs. It's probably closer to 400 because I'm just addicted to experimenting with new things all the time. We grow on just under 2 acres, if you include the land that we have in berry production. We have several hundred raspberry bushes and about 100 blueberry bushes.
So I see as we're looking around, because as we're sat in the farmhouse here, I can see a number of polytunnels, but you also are growing out in the open completely as well, aren't you? 9
seasonal high tunnels. Those are for mitigating risk associated to climate change, right? They help prevent us from getting too much water in heavy rain events. They help us to better irrigate and have humidity and control temperature. But we still grow a good amount of stuff out. That main field is about 1 acre, and we use that to grow summer crops, whereas the tunnels are more for like trellised crops and things that we overwinter.
Is it a 4-season farm?
Yes, we work year round. We are busiest from March through October, in sort of our peak season. But in the winter, we're still in production, but we also spend a good deal of time fixing all of the things that we break during the summer.
I was going to say, there's always maintenance going on, isn't there? How do you deal? You were talking about the polytunnels help with climate change. There's the bugs, there's invasive. How do you deal with all of that? As a farmer, all of that must be so challenging, especially if you don't want to be spraying chemicals or or maybe local law says, oh yeah, you can't be spraying things like this. Talk to us about that, because I don't think people realise exactly how difficult it probably is being a farmer.
Yeah, so we have a 8x10 walk-in cooler behind the barn that our farm crew jokes that's where we go to cry, because it's every single day there's something to deal with. And without relying on chemicals, there are fewer tools in our tool belt, but it also means that we do experience a lot of crop loss, and we overplant. We are doing a lot of things by hand. And all of those white low tunnels that you see out of the window, those are covered with a fabric row cover that excludes insects early in the season from crops that are prone to early season insects. So all of our brassicas, like kale and broccoli, and our onions. But there's new insects coming all the time, right? And which I like the dynamic nature of needing to constantly learn. I love learning. I love reading. And so that part does interest me. But at the end of the day, there are so many times when I'm just
Talk to us about the farming community here in Connecticut, because, as we said, female farmers are growing. We've got veteran farmers as well, of which there are some female veteran farmers. But the majority of farmers here in the state of Connecticut are, and you mentioned this earlier, older white men. And they're aging out as well, because not everybody wants to get into farming. What's the farming community like? Are you fairly close-knit or not?
I would say yes and no. And the only reason that I say no is that people forget how diverse agriculture in Connecticut is. We have an incredible greenhouse industry, right? It's very profitable. Connecticut is actually one of the few egg-secure states, meaning we produce more eggs than we consume. There's a very active shellfish industry. There's not nearly as many dairy farms as there were a few decades ago, but there's still a lot. There are small-scale grain producers. There's a lot of agritourism in the state. So there's all these different types of farms. And so it's hard to stay connected to people who are ultimately doing very different work. But in the winter, there's a lot of conferences and workshops and things, and we tend to get together. But no, I could not farm without other Connecticut farmers to, even at the base level, just commiserate with. There is such a core group of people working really hard for people who don't work in agriculture to understand what it's really like.
And one of the things that we had only a short while ago was last year some really heavy rain and decimated many farms and crops, because obviously it just completely flooded the land. As we were saying, farming is a challenging industry, and when that comes along as well and just adds that sort of loss factor on top. And now, and we're not going to get overly political, but we were talking about this before we started, tariffs are coming in. All of these things add up, don't they?
It does. Yeah, we were talking earlier, we're deep, over our heads deep in renovating our washing and packing building in order, what started with the goal of complying with federal food safety standards for vegetable washing areas. We received federal funding for stormwater management. We live on a state road, and so we get those, what we're seeing more is very dry periods and then very heavy rain events. So it might not rain for 3 weeks, and then we get 4 inches of rain in an hour, which is a month's worth of rain. And on the one hand, our average annual rainfall hasn't changed absurdly, but when I started farming, we used to get an inch of rain a week, and it was okay. And so we'd received federal funding to put in drainage and that sort of thing. And yeah, this year it just feels like the hits just keep on coming in terms of losing funding, the cost of so many of our supplies going up, and access to bulbs and seeds because of the tariffs constantly changing, and sourcing, packaging, which a lot of comes from overseas. It's just something all the time.
Like so many businesses at the moment, it's just a case of having to watch and see, and then having to adapt to keep the business going, isn't it?
That is one thing that all Connecticut farms are. They're resilient. This is not a business that you can run if you're not incredibly devoted to the work. We have developed a resiliency. Perhaps it's unhealthy at times, right? Because we're so committed to the work that we do that it requires sacrifice in other areas. But no, like we know that what's coming is not going to be good, but that we'll figure it out.
At the end of the day, if we don't have farms in every aspect of what they do, growing from the flowers, the vegetables, the meat, etc., we don't have any food. Because without you guys, there isn't anything, is there? And I think that's another thing. People just pop into their supermarket and pick something up and have no idea where it really comes from or how it's grown.
They're not thinking about the labor force that harvested that, the packaging that makes sales in a supermarket possible. At the start of COVID, in early 2020, we were selling to about a dozen restaurants. And initially, they had said, it's going to be a 6-week shutdown, and all restaurants were closed because that was not considered sort of essential service. Later, they were allowed to do takeout, right? But there were multiple phases to learning about how to navigate the COVID world. And in response, the week after they announced, we organized a farm collective with 35 other local farmers and food producers to distribute the products to homebound people in the community. And it came together really quickly, and it relied on way too much volunteer labor to become a business model. But what it showed us was that we have a really strong community in the area of people who want to support other people, small business owners who will do anything to support each other. And that, I tell my kids all the time, you can do hard things, right? Which is something that we all have to be reminded of. But ultimately, we have built an incredible community of people that swirl in and out of the farm for various reasons and at various times, but that we are excited to continue to support because we know that they'll support us.
Well, Allyson Angelini, Connecticut's 2025 Outstanding Young Farmer. It's been great talking to you. Thank you for sharing with us what it is in this modern age to be a farmer. We owe all of you a great debt of gratitude for the fact that you keep that supply chain and that food supply chain going. And we hope that you're successful for many years, whatever comes your way. So thank you again for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.
And you can find out more about Allyson and her farm and the products she grows at the website fullheartfarm, or one word, .com.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
We just kind of knew from the beginning that we were family.
They showcased a sense of love that I never had before. I mean, he's not only my parent, he's my best friend.
At the end of the day, it's all been worth it. I wouldn't change a thing about our lives.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. Brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Time now for a look at other stories making the headlines this week. From Memorial Day to Labor Day is when traffic fatalities on our roads increase. The period has become known as the 100 deadliest days for drivers. Garrett Eucalito is the commissioner for the Connecticut Department of Transportation and says teen drivers are particularly affected.
Inexperience, overconfidence, and distraction are a dangerous mix, and every summer, consequences are fatal. So between 2020 and 2023, 23 teen drivers lost their lives on our roads. That's 23 futures cut short and 23 families forever changed. But this isn't just a teen problem, it's really a public safety and a public health crisis.
Eucalito said in the same period an average of 105 people died on Connecticut's roads, making up 33% of the state's annual traffic fatalities in just 3 months. He said although police patrols will be stepped up during this time, parents as well as teen drivers need to slow down on the roads, buckle up and drive sober. Grace Johnson is a student from Daniel Hand High School in Madison and a survivor of a teen car crash, and explained what happened.
There were 5 of us in the car, music was blasting, we were going around a sharp turn, when we veered off the road, jumped a rock wall, and slammed into a tree, knocking down a power line. It was terrifying and chaotic, and I don't even remember exactly what I hit my head on. That experience opened my eyes. Making safe choices while driving is not just about following the rules, it's about protecting your life and the lives of everyone around you. Every decision from wearing a seatbelt to putting your phone away matters. As teens, we're still gaining experience behind the wheel, which means we have to be even more careful.
Johnson said the driver of the car she was in at the time of the accident had been drinking, and she urged fellow teens to make smart choices and remember, as a passenger, you are not powerless. The environmental non-profit Save the Sound has released its biennial Long Island Sound Beach report recently, just as swimming season begins. Many of the 200-plus beaches in Connecticut and New York in the report are receiving a good rating for their water quality. Peter Linderoth, Director of Healthy Waters and Lands for Save the Sound, celebrated the good news.
Just over 70% of the beaches are receiving an A or a B, good or exceptional grades. That's really fantastic news. That's more than 140 beaches of the 200 plus getting an A or a B. So good job, Long Island Sound, and everyone working for it.
Beaches in eastern Connecticut, New York City and Westchester scored the highest grades in the report. The report also showed that both states have also seen increased wet and dry sample failures of swimming water quality over the last 3 years.
28% of the beaches around the Sound are receiving a C or lower. That's a 6% increase in that grouping of beaches than we saw in the 2023 beach report. That's a percentage we and others are working to change. Can jumpstart conversations between residents, interested community members, organizations, local officials about potential solutions.
10 of the lowest scoring beaches in the new report included Byram Park Beach in Greenwich, Connecticut, and Harbor Island Beach in New York State, both receiving a D rating. Save the Sound said challenges like climate change, old sewer infrastructure, septic tanks, and stormwater runoff into the Sound continue to impact the quality of its water. Governor Lamont's hopes for a digital-first Connecticut where everyone has access and learning to help bridge the digital divide in the state has been put on permanent hold by the federal government. The Department of Commerce, which had previously earmarked almost $17 million to the state under their digital equity plan, has now terminated that funding under direction from the Trump administration. Doug Casey is the executive director of the Connecticut Commission for Educational Technology Administrative Services, who would have been rolling out the digital equity program in the state.
The intent of the program was always to serve every resident in the state and address all groups. That said, the design of the federal guidance was really looking at specific priority populations, and those included veterans, aging adults. It included people who are living at or below the poverty level, people who live in rural areas. So there's a great diversity, and I mean that in the true sense of the word, diversity of audiences.
Casey says although Connecticut has good broadband infrastructure, the funding was also to be used for education and training to help bridge the digital divide.
In our research, we found that the level of skills that people have is way below where we need to be. For example, the level of sort of basic digital literacy statewide is only about 2/3 of residents say that they're confident using technology. So we want to get that to 100%, and we will continue to work with community-based organizations. We'll continue to work through our state agencies. We're really working to achieve that digital-first vision that Governor Lamont has.
Casey said despite the major setback, it's not all bad news, as the state does have funding in place to continue their rollout of the community Wi-Fi program that will help local organizations offer free Wi-Fi and free access to allow residents to get online in their hometowns. Connecticut East this week did reach out to the Department of Commerce about their decision, but has received no response to our request for comment. That's all from us for this edition. Do send us your questions and story ideas to the show via our website at connecticut-east.com or Facebook or Twitter at Connecticut East and on Instagram at Connecticut East This Week. And you can listen to the show again on our social platforms, on demand, and by asking your smart speaker to play Connecticut East This Week podcast. And please like, follow, and share on your social media too. I'm Brian Scott Smith. Thank you for listening.